Добре дојдовте, гледате неделно интервју на Радио Слободна Европа. Наш денешен гостин е господинот Џеј Џенсен, директор за комуникации во сојузничката команда за операции на НАТО. Господине Џенсен, по пандемијата со COVID-19 и војната во Украина, дали светот сега се соочува со опасност од една нова, така наречена информацијска војна и кои се најновите методи кои што се користат во таа војна?
I think that we are facing challenges across many domains. So we have economic challenges, we have military challenges, we have information challenges. When you speak about information war, it's really one component of a spectrum of conflict and competition that we're in. NATO itself isn't at war. We're not having a conflict with anybody at the moment, but certainly there is competition. There is competition between other powers such as Russia. We're worried about terror groups as well. And so we need to be ready for these challenges. And one of my roles is to think about information and the cognitive dimension, so how people perceive NATO and the alliance, what adversaries might try to do in the minds of our citizens, how they could leverage information to divide societies, to create a lack of cohesion for the alliance. These are some of the things that we are focusing on. At the political level, a lot of attention is paid to the idea of resilience and making sure that our citizens are able to spot disinformation, spot things that are not true, spot hostile efforts to cause divisions, to cause problems. At the military level, we're working on making sure that our troops remain protected from those things, making sure that our citizens understand that we are a defensive alliance, that we are professional, that we act appropriately, and that we're ready to respond to threats.
Хибридната војна е предизвик со кој што се соочуваат сите членки на алијансата. Кому му одговара оваа хибридна војна и од кои центри на моќ се води истата?
I think hybrid warfare, these hybrid tactics are affecting all of us. We have a world that is interconnected today. Countries are connected, economies are connected, and certainly we are connected in the information environments. Most of us are on social media platforms, we're sharing videos, we're sharing information, we're consuming more information than ever before. And there are possibilities today to use artificial intelligence, automation. We've heard about bots and fake personas online. And so part of the challenge is the interconnectedness of our world, the ability to automate information and how it flows. And all of us are participating in this environment, but some actors are using malign techniques. They are creating bot farms that have thousands of inauthentic accounts on them, and they use those accounts to multiply false information to help achieve their objectives. Russia is certainly doing this, but they're not the only actor in that space. And for us in NATO, the challenge is how do we understand what's going on? How do we detect these adversarial efforts? How do we protect our societies, protect our troops? And how should we appropriately use tools to communicate our narrative? We can't use the same tactics and techniques as our adversary because we're an alliance that's based on values, but we still need to be effective in communicating our narrative and in dealing with adversarial, harmful information.
Во таа војна во која што се користат дезинформациите, лажните вести и пропагандата како алатки за поголемо влијание и моќ, на каков начин да се заштитиме од штетното влијание на тие информации?
Well, sure. I can talk about a few concrete steps that can be taken. firstly, societal resistance, which is a long-term effort, but the more that people are aware that these types of activities are taking place, that adversaries are trying to communicate with them, and they hide who they are, they hide what they intend to achieve, that kind of awareness helps protect societies. But also things like education and the ability and the desire to seek out other opinions, to know which types of information sources can be trusted and which ones perhaps are not reliable or should be questioned. These types of habits on how people consume information are important, I think, for societies. And the last thing that I would mention as highly effective that we at NATO think about and many allied governments are thinking about is how can we build and maintain trust with our citizens so that when they are confused, when they're faced with false information or inauthentic attempts to communicate with them, do they know that they can turn to NATO, to their government, and say, I trust that person, I know that they're going to give me reliable, factual information, and that will help clarify a certain issue or a space that is contested by an adversary.
Господине Џенсен, кои групи на луѓе или организации се таргет, односно главна цел на центрите кои што шират пропаганда и дезинформации?
Well, I can give you some examples of what Russia in particular does. Russia and the Kremlin is quite opportunistic with their information efforts. And their top priority, honestly speaking, since the illegal invasion of Ukraine, has been their own population. And we saw in the days following the invasion in February 24th that Russian citizens were actually protesting, speaking out. They didn't understand this special military operation. They were questioning the need to send Russian soldiers to Ukraine. Many of those people have connections with people in Ukraine, and they, quite frankly, were questioning their government. And the Kremlin quickly turned their manipulation machine directly on their own population. They shut down remaining opposition sort of media voices, opposition political voices, non-governmental organizations had already started to be closed, but they took even further steps. And then they started to mass market false narratives to their own population. And here's an example. About 4 days before the invasion, you had high-level Russian officials saying there was no effort to invade. This was completely false, that any suggestion that they were going to do something militarily in Ukraine was not true. And then four days later, we saw what happened. And so then they changed their narrative to start suggesting that they need to get rid of so-called Nazis in Ukraine, even though the president of Ukraine is Jewish descent. They manufacture these narratives and they use them for a long period of time and they get stuck in people's heads.
Какви се проценките на НАТО за руското влијание на Балканот? Колкаво е тоа, впрочем, и колку од влијанието е резултат на хибридната војна на Москва за која говорите?
Well, we see quite a number of influences in the Balkan information space, and like we see in other parts of Europe, Russia is certainly active here. And again, I would say that Russia is not principally focused on the Balkans. It's a secondary focus for them, but they know that there are issues here. They know that there are tensions between certain groups, and they try to inflame those tensions. They try to manipulate, to do things that will cause one side to get angry at another side. They hope that that will even lead to disruptions, protests, fights. That's their aim. But they're not the only actors in this space. Obviously, China is active here in a different way. In a longer term way, they're seeking to build economic influence here. They look to bribe or gain favor with officials and try to hope that they can use that to leverage their aims in the region. And of course, different governments in this region also want to influence the region, and so all of those things are working at play together, and it creates a complex environment, one that we need to understand and one that we need to be able to operate effectively. And what I would say is the most effective way for NATO or for a national government to operate in this complex type of situation is to earn that trust and to have your own story, your own strong narrative about what you represent, why that's important, why people should believe you, why people should support you.
Во Скопје деновиве се одржа НАТО конференција за комуникатори. Колку Македонија како последна, како најнова членка на алијансата е подготвена да се соочи со овие безбедносни предизвици, особено во делот на стратегиските комуникации?
North Macedonia is showing a lot of leadership in terms of building their capacities militarily and specifically in the information environment. An obvious signal is hosting this major conference, and it's the first major NATO event that North Macedonia has hosted as our newest ally, and just welcoming in over 300 experts and practitioners from across the alliance and partners. It brings attention to these issues, it energizes debate, it has an impact on us as the alliance, and I think on North Macedonia as the host nation. North Macedonia has also invested in a public affairs regional center, or park as we call it, and they have this center set up just outside of Skopje, and it's involved in training, it's involved in building capabilities in the information environment for the armed forces of North Macedonia, and it's a valuable link between NATO communicating capabilities and those in North Macedonia. We help each other, we work together, and this conference again is reinforcing those relationships, our ability to exchange information, lessons, best practices. So it's really a positive step forward, and North Macedonia, for a relatively small ally and a new ally, they're really setting a good example.
Што е всушност улогата на комуникаторите на НАТО?
Well, principally the role of NATO communicators is to tell our story to our populations and to communicate who we are, what we stand for, and why we're important. And the Washington Treaty that was signed when NATO was formed 73 years ago answers a lot of those questions. We're a defensive alliance. We are based on principles of democracy, of freedom, of respect for international rules that prevent war and build peace. And so, military capabilities, they are ultimately aimed at defending an alliance, but using violence. People don't like to talk about missiles and aircraft and warfare. These are destructive capabilities, but at the end of the day, our societies need to understand that defending our economies, our societies, our beliefs, it's a very important function that needs to be taken care of. And we have 30 allies that have agreed to work together to protect ourselves from threats from any direction. And it's our responsibility to build support, to build understanding, to make sure our citizens understand the importance of defense and security.
Господине Џенсен, ви благодарам што бевте наш гостин.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's great speaking with you, and it's wonderful to be here in North Macedonia.
Вам, почитувани, ви благодарам за вниманието. Се гледаме за 7 дена.